Testing one, two,
Okay,
one,
very
two.
good. I heard Hallie, right? Yes, Hallie and Brian. Okay, so tonight we have a really, really, I, I think intentionally diverse collection of people. One of my jobs tonight is to find out how we all intersect, and there, I believe, in my mind, there is an intersection of all this talent that's here. And to start off, Brian, I'll read the little description that came out, and you can correct me, Brian, please. I have you as a Los Angeles-based musician, keyboardist, synthesizerist. I didn't know there's such a word. Programmer, mixer, stage technician, record producer. He is a member of the Moog Cookbook, which was a group, not a restaurant uh, group of people. And he's the co-author of the book Recording the Beatles, which is an in-depth look at the Beatles studio approach, which is very interesting. And I'm so excited to hear more about that. Hallie is an American screenwriter and actress, I should say, because I was looking at your credits, and it's almost equal amount of time you spent on both sides of the camera, if you will. And she is also known for writing episodes of the HBO television series Westworld, which is some of the more amazing episodes. And then, but more importantly to a lot of the students here tonight, she also is a co-writer of the Last of Us Part Two, which has its own impetus, controversy, and a lot of questions. But she's also known for the Amazon series 2019, Too Old to Die Young, an LA kind of really dark noir series. Then we have Greg Louie, no relationship to me, even though I do know your dad from Chinatown days, San Francisco. We both were in that general vicinity. He's an LA-based editor and works a lot with Fox Sports and the NFL Network. And most recently, I imagine very busy because of the local teams, the Lakers and the Dodgers. And now are we hopefully, maybe, I don't know, the football fiends thinking that at least one, well, okay, maybe not so much the Chargers, but definitely the Rams have a fighting chance of getting into playoffs, maybe. And so you've been doing a lot of things. So let me just start this off with, Greg, because it's much more like right now today. Have you getting any sleep lately? What is it that you've been doing?
Uh, I just started back at NFL last week. Yeah.
How bad? Okay, so what was a typical coverage during the World Series, the baseball World Series?
Uh, the way the pandemic worked this year, they really packed the schedule of games. Uh, with baseball, there were no off days for the entire series. And then same with Lakers, where the games were every other day. So that definitely made the work flow and the work schedule a little more accelerated because staying up to date currently with what's going on, things were just happening so fast and actually almost at the same time, I think,
Yeah.
in terms of both teams. So I was
Did you?
bouncing back and forth between covering both, working for both. So.
Okay. Okay, let me jump to Haley. Okay, if you can, because of your background, it really just bridges so much. How would you describe you and what career you are actually involved in? How would you put that?
Well, today, I guess I would say I'm a writer predominantly, almost exclusively. I sort of cross a bunch of mediums with games and film and TV, but I've pretty much given up acting only because I don't really have time because I've so thrown myself into the writing scene.
Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, Brian, what takes up all your time right now?
Right now, I have a business in my music studio where we take people's old tapes and we transfer them into digital files. And it's been really, really busy, mostly because people are stuck at home cleaning out their closets and their attics. And so It's been overload. It's been good, but it's
Yeah.
not that creative at the moment. But I love having work, and we're involved in bringing people's histories and memories back.
And in that case, so you're like an archivist then, in a way.
It's very, yeah, it's one component of archiving, although really true archiving involves sorting the data and we just basically do the hard part using an old machine that no one uses anymore to translate an old recording into digital files.
So you take from old analog audio tapes, and do you actually have to clean it, process it, and do a lot of technical things to get it to the
It goes back to even 78 records and cassette tapes and all kinds of things. So we try to jump through all the hoops that people need to get it done. And we've had some, basic day-to-day work, but we've had some unique challenges where we had to involve outside people and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nice to be able to adapt and do something in a niche market that not everybody else would be doing.
Right. Okay, let me ask this next question for all three of us, just get us going here. If you can think about for just a sec. The work that you're doing now, if you could look back, let's say, I don't even want to guess ages or so, but let's say a while back when you were at the age of, say, college students, when you were a college student, did you at that time envision to do what you're doing now? Was that something, is what you're doing now what you had hoped to do to your younger self? What would you have told yourself to get ready for? Greg?
I'm a big sports guy, so yeah, I think getting to the point where I eventually got to, I had to go through a bunch of other avenues to eventually end up at a place where you can edit. The way I look at it is you can kind of edit anything as a job, but if you enjoy the content and the material that you're working on, it's just going to reflect in the final product. And so having a love for sports, even though I'm from the Bay Area, so
what's that an excuse?
not as exciting. But either way, I mean, this could have been something where I would have loved to have ended up possibly at some point when I first started out in editing.
Okay. Hallie, was your initial goal? I mean, is that what you're doing now, what you ultimately wanted to become?
Kind of. So I started as a professional actor when I was 9. So I think sort of through my whole childhood, I just assumed I'd be an actor when I grew up. And then when I got to college, I had this discovery of really loving writing. And then I decided I wanted to try and be Tina Fey, so I could do all of it. Yeah, I could act and I could write. And I went to this hippie school at NYU called Gallatin, where you make up your own major. So I ended up studying comedy writing and the history of comedy. And I did like stand up for my thesis.
Whoa.
So like I really thought I was headed in this very comedic direction and performative direction. And now I write graphic sex and violence alone in my sweats. So I did have a pretty big transitional swing, but within the same sort of sphere.
Have you ever met Tina Fey?
I haven't. Someday.
Okay, someday. Would that make your day?
Of course. She's
Yeah.
a badass lady writer. I'm into it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Kind of bridging a lot of venues too, in that regard. Brian, was music and sound, technical sound, always a part of your background?
Yes, but I don't think I had any plans to end up where I've ended up. It's sort of tangential, like Hallie's story. You're involved in an industry, and I do different roles within an industry, from working with bands on tour to helping people design equipment to recording records to writing books about music and music history. So it's all part of the same thing. And I'm glad I have like sort of a work ADD where I don't have to do the same thing every day. And I think most of us would probably enjoy that. If you had to have a desk job, if you will, no matter how cool it was, even if you're a performer on Broadway or something, you'd be doing the same thing hundreds of times over and over, and it would be boring. So for me, I'm happy to be pushed and pulled in different directions. I have a project for 2 months, and then I go over there for 2 months or maybe 6 months, and it's all in music, so it keeps me interested. But I had certainly, when I was younger, as you asked, this was not my plan to end up here doing the things I do. But even just last week, I was talking to my coworkers saying, the people we're working with and the things we're doing would have put our jaws on the floor back then to realize that we'd be on a level to be able to do cool things like that. Now it seems normal and not so special.
And I mean, is that okay? Well, okay, let's draw that obvious connection. None of you actually have maybe Brian, because of your own company responsibility in a so-called 9 to 5, show up at the office every day, clock in, hopefully get your 2 weeks vacation someday. I mean, it doesn't seem like you guys are cut out for that. Was that something that was disappointing that you couldn't do that, or you're so glad do you have the aptitude to do that kind of job, Greg?
NFL is kind of like a 9 to 5 job, kind of, in a way, because for a lot of the shows that I work on, we're taping a live show at 4 p.m. So your whole day is kind of aimed around the 9 to 5 normal schedule and for a time I actually like that, because when you are kind of working either remotely or on your own, you can definitely use the hours how you want to use it, but having that sort of structure actually also helps, at least me in some ways too. So
but are you a formal employee with a W-2 with the NFL?
It's weird how NFL works, where I do get W-2, but they only have 3 staff editors in their entire roster of editors. It's all freelance contractors, essentially.
So you're one of the few staffers? Is that what you're saying?
Nope, not at all.
You're not?
No. I've been freelance there ever since I've started.
Which is how long ago?
2008.
Whoa.
So 10, 11 years.
Yeah.
So, and it's gone through obviously transitions, but there's a benefit to being able to be freelance there and still get the benefits that they do offer, which is
wait, hold on.
Not often in a company.
So do you actually get medical benefits? Let me ask you that.
Not medical, but I get a pension. I get 401k.
Wow.
I've been there longer than 5 years, so my pension's already fully vested there.
That's weird.
And
unusual.
It is unusual. And there has been times at the network where unions have wanted to come in and fight for
more,
because the majority of employees at NFL on that level are freelancers. So
are we saying another 10 employees? How many freelance employees is the pool of editors during the season?
Editor wise, right now there's probably between 35 to 40 people that are just ready to go, kind of freelance on top of the 3 staff guys. But it could be more. I think it's less because of the specific season and with the pandemic. But
It's a shortened season, everything.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's okay. We'll come back to some of that. Hallie, how do you make a living? Do you go just from script to script, show to show? Who decides that?
Yeah, so it's a few different paths. So I have managers who tend to try and get me interviews for jobs, and then I have to sort of cinch the deal in person or over Zoom now. So yeah, I get submitted for a bunch of jobs, and then I meet on some, and then I take the ones that I like or the ones that are offered to me, and I usually juggle a couple of jobs at a time. So like right now I've got like 3 jobs going at the same time.
Wow.
Because with sort of the freelancing thing, I find it's, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket unless you're Greg, who clearly has a good situation. But, you don't want to you want to keep it moving because something falls through, something doesn't work out, something takes twice as long. You want to make sure you're paying your rent. But I've also, so that's like stuff that comes my way, but some of those jobs are office jobs. So like when you're writing on staff for a TV show, largely those are in-person 10 to 7 jobs usually, that are usually 10 to 20 weeks at a stretch. And then my gig for The Last of Us Part 2 was a full-time job where I was working at the office very adult hours and had health insurance and all that stuff.
Wow.
But I
How
also,
long-
I get my health insurance through a union, through the
Yeah.
Writers Guild.
right.
So that's my main
Okay. So
area.
real quickly, and correct me if incorrect, being part
Mm-hmm.
of the Writers Guild, which is like a union, as close as you can get to union.
It
that
is
you-
a union.
It is a union, and that
Yeah.
you amount so many minimum hours per quarter, then you meet that minimum, then you get medical coverage. Is that correct?
So it's
Something
actually,
like
they
that?
do it by dollars. So if you
Oh.
make, I think it's, I think right now it's somewhere around 36 grand a year. And if you hit that, which is sort of equivalent to one episode of an hour-long television series. So if
Whoa.
you get that job, you are covered for the year.
Right.
And then if you make more than that, they have this nice rollover thing where
Oh,
if you make more, it'll like hold on to it and you'll get extra quarters,
okay.
which is
So
nice because it is such an
yeah,
ebb
it's
and flow business.
like rollover time on your cell phone bill, or at least they
Exactly.
used to do that. Yeah. Okay.
It's great.
So
Highly recommend.
yeah. Okay, Brian, was there anything as stable as that? A union or someone to look after you to
Completely the opposite. Completely the opposite. I have probably, I mean, one day I added it up and I had 18 jobs running.
No.
And they're different roles. Like that one involves my studio, one involves writing books, writing another book, working with somebody on a project. And I like that. It is absolutely not for the faint of heart or
No.
people that need to have security. I chose a different life. And as you mentioned before, we don't have 9 to 5, but I do make my own hours, but I often work sort of twice as hard as most people I know.
Right.
And I like that. I mean, I'm not a workaholic. I love to take
Oh,
breaks.
you're not
So I-
workaholic. Oh yeah, right,
No.
right.
No, I mean, I'll take a day off tomorrow if I want to, but I don't want to. I have a great job. I can't wait
Okay.
to go in and work on what I'm working on, which I can't tell you what it is, but it's that cool. And so in the case of these things, there's days when you don't want to be there, but I've gotten to a point where I enjoy what I do. And some of my friends can't stand it because they really need to have a steady paycheck. They need to
Right.
have their ducks in a row. They have plans for the future. I'm looking forward to the future, but I don't know what it involves. And it's a different kind of optimism maybe versus people who are worried about things. And so I live a different life than they do.
Okay, well, let's finish that thought. You mean after all these years, and you've been doing this for quite a while, you still don't know your future? Is it
Completely.
intact? Are you secure in your mind that you're going to be okay?
It always has been, probably always will, but I don't, again, it's a mind state for people. And
Is it-
you know, if somebody said you need to move to Hawaii and you're going to become a gardener, I'd be okay with that. I'd find something fun about it and take it on. And so there are different people that think different ways. Some people have to know what they're doing, but I love the saying, and you probably heard it, you know, life is what happens when you're making other plans. All my greatest opportunities were not something I planned for.
Hmm.
All my greatest things came to me out of the blue, maybe because of who I knew, or I accidentally ran into someone at a party, and it turns into the next phase of your life.
Yep.
But if you just planned for it, it wouldn't be, I wouldn't say disappointing, but you'd be missing these wonderful opportunities that most of us, if you look back on life, it doesn't happen the way you expect in love and in business and in other things like that. And greater things can come to you than you expected.
Well, this is interesting, and I think the two of you guys would understand exactly what Brian's saying. You guys lived it yourselves. But for these students who are here tonight, who are now in the program trying to figure out what kind of career path they're going to take, obviously they're all interested in media and design and some kind of subjective, arty, creative kind of environment. So are you saying, Brian, that when you started, didn't you have like a regular job and then that launched you into this, or was it always this unknown?
When I went to school, I studied in a 4-year program to learn to make recordings, to make records. And that was
Okay.
my goal. It was my dream. I do that, but not in the way that I planned. People bring me old material to work with, like, you know, Aretha Franklin or Black Sabbath or U2 or something. And they bring me older things to work on. And I don't even work with the group, but I'm working on much bigger projects than I would have hoped for.
Mm.
And because I have a good reputation and reasonable prices and quick turnaround and all these things that keeps me working, but I can also choose to stop that and work on books because I have a book company. And if I want to stop for 2 years and just do books, I can do that too. But I'd rather juggle it. And so the planning aspects that you're talking about, I think to gather your muscles, your tools of what you do, maybe you'll be great at video editing and you will end up doing commercials, or maybe you'll work for a corporation, or maybe you'll make your own YouTube channel. They're all very different, but they use the same tools.
Mm.
So, in working with people, which is often the underlying thing, I don't know if you guys have studied psychology, but I sure wish I did, because that's the real key to getting forward in life for me, is to get along with people.
Ah, there's the rub. That is the rub, isn't it?
No, do you see people who are incredibly exceptional, but they can't communicate well or whatever? Maybe they can work in their cubicle and do mathematical figures or some kind of creative thing. But most people have to deal with other humans in their work, and especially in a hierarchy where there's a boss and somebody paying you, things like that. If you get to know the accountants, you're almost set. That's the best thing.
You're right. Ironically, my 4-year degree of college was psychology, and I vowed never to follow that path. It was just an easy major for me. But anyway, Greg, how did you learn your craft? Did you go to school for this?
I did not go to school for editing, but by the time that I was finishing up my undergrad, that's when kind of digital video editing kind of just started to become a consumer product. That Final Cut Pro had just come out in the early 2000s, and so became really accessible to a lot of people. And basically you were able to kind of learn just by experimenting almost without real formal training, I think. And the early couple years that I started out were the most random, probably crazy editing jobs I've ever done in my life. Those first early ones, because you don't know what you're doing really. That's kind of how you learn, I think.
So you're self-taught then?
Yeah, in some ways, I think that's how a lot of people, when they get to these sort of crafts, when at least on that technical side, are able to, when they get access to either the software or the programs, are now able to do it on their own time and learn from the internet and learn from other people and kind of make it their own, I think. So,
but then there was some interest to go that way. What sparked that interest for you? Why did you go there? But then you're in school for what? Was it media? Was it film studies? What was it?
I went to school for communication.
Okay.
Fairly generic major, meaning I didn't really have a real clear idea what I was going to do afterwards. But I was introduced to the video editing software in college. So I was able to mess around with it on some free time. And I had another friend, going to school, but he was down in LA, and he was actually in like a media program at UCLA, in Asian media. And he approached me about getting involved on a small independent movie he was working on, and rest is history almost. You kind of see it up close firsthand, and you just kind of love it, I guess, right? Just kind of creativity and kind of the unknown, as Brian was saying, was actually kind of the fun part in the beginning, was not knowing where it was going to lead to. So,
but you made something of it, obviously.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think even NFL, I mean, I started NFL probably in my late 20s. So I had done a lot of stuff up to then. And NFL kind of just became a little bit of a consistent sort of thing I could fall back on while still being able to do other interesting and creative projects, obviously. So
right.
Yeah, it's led me to a great path. So
Okay. Okay. Now let's get to the gritty here, Hallie. Will there be part 3 to?
I am not allowed to comment on
Oh,
that.
you are not allowed. You signed.
No,
They
I
got
sign a lot
you.
of
They
things all the
got to
time.
you,
Yeah, I
Hallie. They got
know.
to
I
you.
know, the man.
Oh,
I know. Terrible.
oh.
But I'm sure there will be other
We're
games
talking about
that I could
Neil.
say.
Are we referring to Neil Druckmann by any chance?
He is a human who would probably be upset if I said things. He is one of the humans.
There is a rumor that there's going to be a TV episodic series.
Yeah. He's
on the
working with
game.
Craig Mazin, who created Chernobyl, and they're working on a thing. They're working on a show.
How? Okay, wait. Are you going to get involved? Do you think?
I don't think so. I mean, right now it's about the first game, and I wasn't involved with the first game.
Hmm.
But I
Well,
support them emotionally, and I think they're both lovely boys.
okay. I don't want to stir too much dirt here, even though people have varying opinions. But okay, all right. We're talking about the game, The Last of Us. Yeah, right. And you,
Sure. Yes.
how did you? Was it because your Westworld credits that they sought you out, or did you? How did that come about?
Well, Neil was looking for a co-writer for the game, and at the time, I was with an agency called UTA, which is one of like the big writer Hollywood agencies, and my agent had been trying to poach Neil for a long time to get him to come into Hollywood. And so Neil reached out to him and said, "Hey, who you got? I'm looking for a writer to help me break this new game." And so my agent sent a bunch of people, and then Neil read the scripts and then picked a few out to interview, and then, we got along. And then 4 years later, the game came out. 4.5 years
Wow.
later, I think. Yeah.
I mean, that's how long it took you to get it together, or is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So when I took the job, I sort of to what Brian said, like I'm a freelance gal. I like the freedom of it. I like the flexibility of it. I like being able to bail if things get weird. I like being able to start new things. And when I sat down with Neil, I was under the impression it would be a short-term gig, that's something I could pop in for 6 to 8 weeks at a stretch and do, and then jump out and do some TV rooms. And when I sat down with Neil, he was like, "Hey," or I asked him like, "Hey, how long is the commitment on this?" And he was like, "Oh, like 2.5 years." And I was like, "No, I don't do that. I don't commit. I'm not a committer."
Yeah.
But I really liked what he pitched, and I really believed in what Naughty Dog does as a studio. I think that what they're trying to do in terms of telling stories that sort of reflect the world we see around us, I think is really special. So I said to him, "Look, I'm down to try and make it work if you're down to try and make it work." And there was a period of time where like I was doing Naughty Dog from 10:30 to 7, and then I drove to Sherman Oaks and I would work on this TV show with Nicholas Refn from 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. And I was just doing that for a while, twice a week. So, with the freelance life comes, sometimes you gotta juggle and you gotta hurt a little bit, but
Right.
it's usually worthwhile because you're working on stuff you believe in.
So give us a little insight into part 2. I'm sorry, it's The Last of Us. I said The End of Us. I apologize. The Last
Sorry.
of Us.
I call it T2, Terminator style.
I mean, I've had students who are here who've told me it's such an emotional process to play this game. People have spent 25
It's a sad
hours.
game.
People have spent 25 hours getting through this universe. And
That's a good
afraid.
time, actually. That's pretty good speed.
Okay. So, and how much is the game? $60? How much, or is it going?
Probably. I think we just went on sale, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, something like that.
So the idea, and this is where I'm going with this, because on one level, you've been involved in television and film also, I believe. Yes.
Yeah.
And so you think, even if you're paying before they shut down the theaters, if we're paying $15 to go see a 3-hour movie, 2.5-hour movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't add up. That's $15 already. I mean, for paying 4 times that, you're getting like 5 times more, experience. And in that way, in the gaming business, is dollar per minute. They're making so much more money on this whole game thing. I mean, did you play games before you got involved with Neil? Did you?
I did, yeah.
were
I'm an
this-
only child, so I spent a lot of time playing video games growing up by myself. So I liked games. I would consider myself back then a casual gamer. I think I play a lot more now because it's so much in my zeitgeist.
Mhm.
But yeah. So no, I think it's an incredible business with incredibly nice, hardworking, passionate people. Highly
Wow.
recommend games if
Really?
you don't mind working hard. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We do have a
It's really
department.
for the Ravenclaws, you know what I mean? It's like people who like to put their head down and work.
Yeah. And but in that sense, I'm going to jump over to the Westworld because I've had more experience with that than with the game. I'm sorry, but
Sure.
nonetheless, there's something so game-like of that series in that
Yeah.
maze, if you will, and to keep all this whole entourage of characters and keep track of these people who are out in the hinterland and the guys inside programming and blah 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 and jumping back and forth. I mean, I looked up your credits and it says that you were a story editor for about at least 7 episodes or 6 episodes.
For season 1. Yeah.
And then you actually wrote a complete episode or co-wrote, and you have a writer's credit on episode 6, I believe.
Yeah. So the way writing professionally for TV works is you have usually a writer's room, right? So there's, somewhere between 2 to 20 people in a room. And then there's a hierarchy. So the different levels that you're at have different titles. So story editor is just a title. It didn't mean that I edited. I didn't edit. I wrote sort of like anybody else. It was just the title of my job. So like now I think my title is supervising producer, I think.
So is
Or
it?
no, co-EP. I'm co-EP on the thing. So that, I guess. But like, but yeah, so that's sort of how that works. So we all, like with Westworld and with a lot of different TV shows, you get that group of people together. I think Westworld, we fluctuated around 8 people. Some people moved in and out, but so we're all sitting there together and we're all breaking all the episodes together and we're all outlining together, and there's a wall with note cards for all of us to keep track of timelines and characters and all the jazz, and there's a person, a writer's assistant, whose sole job is to take notes and keep track of everything. And we had a gal named Gina Atwater who's brilliant and became a writer on later seasons, and she had binders that were organized like ways that I could never conceive of, because that show's really complicated. So that's all sort of done together. So as much as it says like I wrote episodes 6 and 7, we were all working on all of the episodes.
Got it. So is those job description designation, story editor versus writer versus coordinating producer, whatever, is it just a issue of?
They're all writers.
I know, but was it an issue of pay, different pay for different titles?
Yeah, so that usually indicates your level of pay. Though everybody kind of negotiates independently with your agents and lawyers and whatever. So, there's usually like a bracket of pay for each group.
Okay.
It's not rock solid.
But it's pretty.
There's just, I think, minimums.
Okay, but it's pretty decent pay.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's great. If you can get it, I recommend
it. You can get it, yeah.
Yeah.
Before we get too far, only because I went through this trouble queuing up a scene from Westworld. I just want to interrupt everybody for a moment. I'm going to take the screen. I'm going to play this. Hopefully.
Man, I haven't watched Westworld in a while. Let's do this. This is exciting.
I know. And I'm going to, hopefully that this will not stutter and Okay. Let me do that one more time. It was trying to get the whole thing fit screen, but describe it for us, Hallie. This is the episode where I'm going to Maeve, her character, and how she starts to ask for more control.
I mean, I gotta be honest with you. I wrote it 5 years ago, so
okay.
the gist, the gist is basically that the characters want to start gaining consciousness, or start being aware that they're being reset and that their memories are being controlled. And Maeve, because she's an independent spirit like Beyonce, takes matters into her own hands and starts gaining it herself and cajoling some low-level text to help her do that.
Interplay they have. So do you have a preference between working, say, the more traditional narrative filmmaking, storytelling, television film stuff versus the more intriguing and much more challenging, I would think, to come up and tell the game story? Is there a difference in your mind how that's approached?
Sure. I mean, I think the differences are they're more in application. I think narrative is narrative. And one of the nice things, and I think Brian sort of said this, where like you learn certain things and those are just things that you carry with you. You know, narrative structure is narrative structure, whether you're looking at novels or film and television or video games. There's a 3 or 5 act structure that follows a very traditional hero's journey. And some people break those rules, but largely they're all the same. So if you understand that, then it's really just about application, you know, where with TV breaks, you have to think about, are there commercials, or I have to set it up on a cliffhanger, or like pacing of that stuff, versus like movies where you need to think about it, a full clean 3 act structure, and how does this end, versus games where you have to think about like, okay, this is a combat setup, and then this is like a narrative area, and then this is a cinematic. And so those are all like universes you have to learn. And I was really fortunate when I was working at Naughty Dog that they accepted my complete ignorance in how games are made, and over the course of 4 years jammed it into my brain in the kindest and most loving of ways. But it's, you know, it's very technical, but it's the narrative side. I just like telling stories. So for me, it's not really about the medium, it's about where do I get to tell the coolest stories? And, you know, oftentimes that's TV, unless you find lovely game studios like Naughty Dog, who are really interested in telling character-driven stuff. But yeah, for me, it's not like medium preference.
But there's a certain amount more of interactivity, say, in the game design.
And, absolutely, yeah.
And how
it's
okay. Explain.
Yeah, no, it's more. There's more minutia. You know, like when I was working. So in TV, you're writing with your writers, your squad, and you're all sitting around a table, and you're talking about the therapy you just went to, but also what should we do with this narrative twist over here in Act 3. When you're writing movies, you're usually by yourself and then in your sweats and then getting notes from producers. With games, I spent the majority of my time not actually writing. I spent the majority of my time working with designers and animators and different departments. Naughty Dog's a huge studio, and I think we were, by the time the game came out, somewhere between 300 and 400 people.
Whoa.
And so I was really like, running like a little jackrabbit through that office, trying to make sure that the narrative was working in all these different sort of slices of the game, to make sure that the characters were having the narrative arcs and landing the emotional punches that we wanted them to. And also, yeah, that was largely what I was doing, and giving Neil help, but that was mostly what I was doing.
So in that way, you're kind of producing also at the same time. Directing, producing, art direction. It's a lot to handle. No?
It is. Yeah. They gave me, it's funny because I sort of, again, to Brian's point, like writers are writers. Like we don't really, these titles we have for money reasons, but they don't totally matter. But like in games, they have, even as much as Naughty Dog is a flat structure, there is a level of hierarchy. So halfway through, they gave me a promotion, which was very sweet of them, where I got the title of narrative lead, which sort of meant that, my responsibilities moved beyond the writing aspect to the more producing side of things.
But was there a Bible, as it were, that you knew the outcome? You knew what was going to happen to those two lead characters. And I don't think I'm giving anything away. Those who know the game, who play the game, know there was a lot of disgruntled fans when one of the principals was taken care of in a very brutal sort of way. I mean, was that always in the plan from the get-go?
Oh yeah. Neil pitched me that when we interviewed. He was like, here's what I know I want to do, and there were like tentpole moments. There was a different ending than the ending that we have now, but he had like some big moments that he knew he wanted to have, and that controversial moment actually was one of the reasons I was so excited. I was like, whoa, that's ballsy, let's do it.
Oh, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And okay. All right. I'm going to jump over to Brian for a sec. I'm looking at your Wikipedia page, and you mentioned a little bit earlier, you mentioned Aretha's name. I See Talking Head, Little Feat, Fleetwood Mac, Ramones, Pretenders, Morrissey, Alice Cooper, The Faces, Eagles, Black Sabbath, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, The Stooges, MC5, Yes, Elvis Costello, Crazy Horse, Tiny Tim, Stone Temple Pilots. These are people, major groups, and you were what with them?
Well, here's the short arc of a longer story, is that I grew up making records and learning to record, originally at a college, and then training, and then going out in the real world and doing it for a living. And then I was attached to the original way of recording using analog tape, and I hated computers, and I thought it was a stupid way to make music. Sort of still agree with that. But it was a choice at the time to go against the grain and be different than everyone else, because I liked what I liked. And then I became one of the few people still working with tape, maybe like a writer would still work with, a typewriter even. It's a different way of working because you can't cut and paste on a typewriter. You can't just, grab a whole thing and move it. And same with tape. So I grew up with the sound of that, and I liked the method of working. Eventually, I was one of the last people standing. And so Warner Brothers said, we have this giant Indiana Jones sized warehouse with all of our tapes in there. And Jimi Hendrix is in there, and Madonna and Green Day and the Commodores, and they can't play those tapes anymore. And I was one of the 2 or 3 places in town that could play them. So they said, we want to go through some tapes by this person or that person. Can you put all the tapes on and just see what's on there? And so what we're looking for is outtakes or different versions or an early version. Luckily, Warner Brothers, to me, is the best record label. They have this incredible diversity, from Frank Sinatra to the Coasters to the Chili Peppers. And these are all, big and small names, but it's kind of a small community of those that work there at the label, and myself on the outside working with their tapes. So it is still creative, but Madonna does not come over. Prince is not dropped by the studio, but I work on their tapes. and I do creative things. I actually produce and put out projects for those groups, but I never meet them most of the time. And I love it because I don't have to deal with them and hear their problems. And I actually get to make my own creative decisions on the whole process, pretty much, except for the record cover. And then we hand it to them and see if they like it. And almost always they like it. And I have a long history of music, a musical family, and I grew up like devouring music, like some people do with sports or some people do with theater. So I love all kinds of music, and I'm pretty good at all kinds of music. So when somebody brings me the Red Hot Chili Peppers or Pantera or soul music, I understand what makes it good and sort of what to do with it. So I work hard to make the artist feel flattered.
So
we've never put out something.
Are you remixing their tapes, or are you actually doing the final?
There's a term though. Think about it. The term remixing is complicated. We don't mix something that's already been mixed, and we don't remix in the way that DJs take a track and then modify it, mutate it into something new. I'm actually doing mixes of things no one's seen before. So these are things that never came out, things that have never been heard before.
Wow.
So you're hopefully bringing out maybe the demo of a famous song or the live version, or maybe just they recorded it 3 times and we're going to put out number 2 because number 3 came out and sold 1 million copies. So and that is a great job, and I really love it. No one would have dreamed that it existed. I didn't know, and maybe it didn't exist in the past, that people went looking through the garbage to see if something good was thrown away. In fact, a lot of these famous tapes were thrown out or left behind, all the outtakes. And very much when you cut a film, did they keep all the outtakes? That's why they call it the cutting room floor. You keep what's good and you throw away the rest. Now we have director's cut on so many films where they're planning and they're thinking, and they're also shooting a behind the scenes, how we made this movie so that people can have more information. But in my day and in growing up, I don't think people thought that way. And so if you were writing a book, you would throw away all the bad drafts of it. You would only keep the good draft eventually. So I'm lucky in that I found a niche, accidentally fell into it with one of the biggest companies, but also I love to work on things in a creative musical sense, but I don't take the path everyone else has taken. And I have less competition that way too.
You make a stand for yourself. This is what you're known for. So this is an important element, folks, is to learn your craft well, as our panelists all have the craft. And there's something about it that then you add your own DNA to it, I think. And that's what makes it special, because everybody in this town, there's so many professionals, so many specialists, so many really, really good, talented, skilled craftspeople in their arena. But what separates one from that big mass is your personality, your attitude, your sensibility to how you approach each thing, possibly a little bit differently than the standard norm, rather than just spit it out. And you could be very quick and be very efficient. Yeah, okay, that's appreciated when you have deadlines and you're working all night long to punch out a new page or a new script or a new cut or a new track. But then spend the extra 2-3 hours beyond that to make it even more special and unique because of who you are. And, you know, I talk about it. It is our DNA. I mean, I, for years, cut Ford car commercials, and there's only so many ways you can look at a pickup truck. There aren't that many ways. But to keep my own sanity, if this is what I'm going to do for the next 2-3 months, you know, another 5 commercials, I got to make it mean something to me. Otherwise, why do it?
It's also a way to grab some market share for yourself, is to look at what you do. Let's say you're a plumber or you're a professional dancer. You know, find what you like about it and what you hate, and push away the hating part. What you don't like to do is spend hours and hours rehearsing, or if you're a plumber, you hate to just renovate, you want to design new houses, then really pursue the part that makes you different, because otherwise you're fighting an uphill battle with everybody else in the same stream. Right. And I wrote a book years ago because I was interested in how the Beatles made their records, and I couldn't find the information anywhere. So I studied and studied to try to find it. and suddenly realized other people out there wanted the same information. Why don't I put it in a book? We went the usual channels. We shopped it around to book companies, and they were all interested, but they said the book can only be 300 pages. It can't have a lot of pictures. We said, why is that? And they said, well, they don't sell. If books are longer than 300 pages, and if they cost more than 30 bucks, it really doesn't sell. Can't have a lot of pictures, and the Beatles pictures cost too much. So we ended up doing our own book. We published it ourselves. We put hundreds of pictures in. We made it 600 pages.
Whoa.
And we found that most books you read are either a book of text, like somebody's life, or they're a photo book, like a coffee table book of beautiful cars or beautiful houses. But we wanted a book that was right down the middle. It was half text and history, half photographs. And it's not like it's never been done, but it's not common. And then the book has exploded and done really well. And in fact, we would probably have not seen much money from it if we went to a normal publisher, but we carved it out ourselves. We sold it online. We've only ever sold it direct to the customer, and it's done great. So I think if you are a video editor, if you're a plumber, if you're a gardener, to find what you like to do is maybe work with purple plants and orange plants, and then get known as the person that does that, because you're going to be in your own world.
Great advice. So, okay, let me just touch on the Beatles just for a sec. I mean, their manager or the producer was George Martin. Is that correct?
Yeah.
There's some guy named Jeff Emmerich. Is that name familiar to you?
Yep. He was one of their main recording engineers.
And what made, okay, the only thing I can think of is Sgt. Pepper. I may be wrong and just assume that is one of their key moments, because there was it was all analog, it's all audio tapes in those times. There's no computers, no digital stuff, but yet they create such a strange and different sound on almost every track on that album. And correct me if I'm wrong about this, please, but they were inspired by the Beach Boys. Would that be part of that story? Do I have
Sure.
that?
I mean, one of the subtexts of what we did in studying it was we learned about creativity. And if you think about this, we're talking about how long ago it was. Nowadays, if somebody's doing audio, even for a film, you have hundreds of tracks, but the most number of tracks, separate audio components they had, were 4 channels for the Beatles. And they made Beatles records, which are still good, still great compared to what people are making now. So I feel that we often build in limitations to ourselves, saying, I don't have enough cameras, or I don't have the right resolution on this camera, or I don't have enough microphones to record this music the way somebody professional does. But the reality is your creativity is what people want. And so with the Beatles being creative people, their producer being creative and so forth, you can work with your phone. And we've seen that. Great films can be made with a phone. You can edit it yourself. You can even edit it badly, and it could still be a great film if the idea is good. And if you write a script, you could put it on stage on a play. You could do it with hand puppets. You could do it as a cartoon. The idea is the strength of it, not the medium, and not how much money you spend on it.
Because
So
right,
everybody here can look at their world and say, feel if you're maybe limiting yourself by telling yourself, I don't have something that other people have, because what you have is yourself. What you have is your ideas. And hopefully, whether you want to be Leonardo DiCaprio, but you have like 3 eyeballs and you're weird, you'll get different roles that he would never get. And they may not be the same role, but you have to find what makes you different, hopefully, and then carve a niche for yourself.
Because the whole thing, okay, you said they only had 4 track, which was a lot in those days. And a lot of that was mono, not stereo necessarily. And I understood they preferred mono, meaning single track versus left and right. But at the same time, how many tracks do you think would go into a contemporary recording?
At least 80, 100 more. Oh. And they don't necessarily even sound better. I mean, if you can say it sounds good, but if you really A/B the sound quality, I would say a lot of old records sound better than new records. We get busy with all the details, and if making a film, you can do CGI and have 1,000 dinosaurs fighting 1,000 Roman warriors, but it doesn't mean that's a good story. It's just impressive to look at for a minute.
Okay. Now, I know, I don't know if this is correct, but I did look up George Martin, and there was a documentary on him, and this whole process, I was quite interested in it. And I'm going to, again, sorry for the previous screen. Let me see if this works any better or worse. Let me just try this. This is a little bit, which was a thing about him meeting the Beatles. Do you guys see the black and white shot? Any comments on that, Brian?
Well, my next book is actually being done for Sir George Martin. He asked us before he passed away to do a book with him. And so we went over to spend some time and work with him. And we've been working on it for quite a few years now, even though he's passed away, to finish it. But again, it's the same thing. I wouldn't have imagined it when I was young, but we did evidently such good work on our projects that he got to notice us and said, these guys are professional. These guys are cool. These guys are serious about the making of records. And we didn't care about gossip. We didn't care about the drama of it. We wanted to know how technical people made a Beatles record, and that's what we studied. Mm-hmm. So he asked us to come in and work on a project with him. He was already terminal, so we knew he wasn't going to last too long, but he's certainly one of those people. If you think about it, the Beatles are so famous, and he's probably one of the most famous producers, but for every person you see on a screen, there's 100 people working to get there, maybe 500 if you think of publicists and people such as projectionists in the theater. So there's so much that goes on that if you just aim to be a director or aim to be George Martin, a producer, or aim to be a famous actor or something, you're missing the point. Is that there's so much work for people, and there's very few people get to that little sliver of it. But to be involved in your medium, whatever it is probably the goal. People should open up themselves to what may come their way.
There was a question that was submitted earlier, and since I got you on right now, the question was, as you look back on your career, is there anything you would have done differently, or any mistakes that you made, and what advice you might give for that?
I can't say for sure, but there's a few times when I've had arguments with people. And one time I was doing a big record with a friend of mine who was well known, and we had an argument towards the end about management and about who gets paid and who gets credit and so forth. And I was only sticking up for what was written in the contract. They were trying to change that. and I made a big fight about it, and then eventually stopped working with them. And I've still since mended the fences, but I would have gone in a different direction at that point into making more records. But the trade-off being, although I would call that a regret, because of that change, I made this book that I told you about, which has done very well.
Mm.
So I wouldn't have ever written that book if I'd stayed employed and busy making records. Instead, I went and wrote a big book that turned into another part of my life. So
Okay.
it's not a real regret.
So don't be afraid, as it were, to make mistakes. Would that be a lesson we can learn? Would you?
I think somebody, Elon Musk or somebody said that almost everybody fails most of the time. It's only, I mean, he launched rockets, a dozen rockets that crashed and burned before they got one that went into the sky, but they didn't give up. And Thomas Edison made at least hundreds of light bulb filament experiments before he got one that worked. But because he kept working and not giving up, we have light bulbs now.
Mm.
So there's a lesson there.
Okay. Greg, I'm gonna jump over to you. Did you have a clip or something? What? Or I have a clip.
I mean, it's up to you. It depends what you would want to.
Well, okay. I have.
I should share something.
I have the Linsanity graphic element. You know that one? You did that, right? With all the layers and layers and layers, and all that.
You mean the title sequence?
No. This is inside the piece where it was when Linsanity took off, and it was all this After Effects.
We hired somebody to do those graphics.
Oh, come on, man!
I wish I could take claim for that, but I would definitely be not giving credit to somebody that did that much work. That is a lot of work.
But did you come up with the concept? Did you do some of this?
I mean, I think conceptually, I might have mocked up something that had the idea of YouTube, Twitter, and a lot of action going on the screen at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think kind of going back to what a lot of us have been saying tonight, sometimes you got to hire people that are really good at that stuff.
Well, I'm going to show it anyway.
Yeah, go ahead and show it. I will. I wish I knew who to give credit to. So
okay, but just as far as the stylistic thing of this, in a documentary, some people think documentaries are kind of staid, kind of, they think PBS, but we've all moved forward from that quite a bit. But let me just see how lucky I get with playing this one. Let's see, how long is it? you had nothing to do with that, Greg? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
No, I did. I mean, I probably laid in the video, probably is what I did, and had that all kind of shelled out. And our graphics person came in and was able to do all the flourishes with the Twitter and all the text on him in the background while he's dribbling. So conceptually, it's something where, you know, I'm collaborating with the director of the film, as well as what the graphics person thinks he or she can actually accomplish when we get to that point. But we knew we wanted it to be something celebratory, kind of in a way, when we got to that point in the doc. At that point, obviously, we're kind of using it as kind of not the height, but it's kind of his popularity that kind of is showing how literally 10 days can take you to the most famous person, you know, on the planet. So.
But you guys had started this whole story of following Jeremy because you're from the Bay Area, and the director, the whole crew is from the Bay Area, right? And
yes,
here was a guy who grew up in Palo Alto in the suburbs. His parents had a Chinese restaurant, and he was just kind of unknown. He was stellar in his high school, took him to nationals, but then he was never picked up in the draft. And eventually Harvard picked him up. Like, how many people know about Harvard's basketball team? Well, they did after he joined them. And then from that, to have this Chinese American kid, and because Greg and I both grew up in San Francisco, Chinatown, pretty much, this was pretty unique, would you say? That you guys were doing this film already before all this hoopla happened.
I had seen footage of them when they had started filming him before he had even got to New York. So they had been filming him probably a good year and a half before. And the way it kind of happened was I was finishing up at NFL when all the craziness started going down. And, you know, when things kind of went the way it went, me and the director kind of like, it felt like we were sitting on like the biggest stock in the world, just waiting for us to be able to follow through on the access that we had with him. And so I immediately flew out to New York, I think, in the midst of that whole stretch, and said, we need to get started and figuring out, one, not necessarily how to tell the story, because we obviously didn't know where this was going to head, but to get a kind of head start on figuring out, you know, with what we had already shot and, you know, what we were going to be able to shoot as everything went, what we had. Because I think before we thought we probably had something that would be fun to tell from, you know, a Asian American kind of story, but then it got to another level where we really couldn't contain. I mean, it became like a Hollywood story. It wasn't like a documentary anymore. It was almost like the script was being written for us in a way. So.
Right. So you just hung on tight and just followed all the way down.
As long as we could. And, you know, everything, you know, with him, it's so crazy kind of looking back at that now, how long ago that feels. But yeah, I think documentaries, I look at it a lot of time as obviously kind of just capturing these moments. And when you're actually in the moment while it's happening, you can kind of either remember who you were with, who you might have shared these moments with, and they kind of stand out because after that, he still ended up playing another 7-8 years in the NBA. But those 2 weeks are still going to be kind of, you know, what he'll probably write down as number one. So.
And for other people who feel they've been unrepresented, here's a kid who went up there and got to the peak.
It was kind of the simple story of it's the underdog story that I think a lot of documentaries are able to tell the person that, but from a different perspective, because of, I think it's really what we were trying to explore is it just because he looks that way, not because he can actually play like that? Because if you just kind of didn't see an Asian face, you would just think he was as good as all these other guys. but I think that's still a stigma that he still has to go up against even today, as he's probably still trying to find his career. So
Right. And it's not like just because he made it at that time, that moment, that means all these other kids who are perhaps not the demographic of what the NBA is currently, will they have a shot, you know? And that's the whole thing also. And that's a tough line to toe in a way. So in that way, the politics, the culture, all that. Now, how does that relate to what you're doing now with the NFL and Fox Sports and all that? Do you get to play like this also, or?
it's interesting where the NFL is almost like the 9 to 5 in a way, because that live show is essentially like a news show. So I'll edit stuff for that show and it'll air or it'll tape at 4, but once the show's over at 5, I'm not thinking about anything I did on that show. It's a little different where I don't have to like take something with me
Home.
and I'm still thinking about something I did wrong, or there's some, like, it's like a normal 9 to 5 where when I finish that show's done. That's just the show for Thursday, November 4th. Tomorrow's going to be another show in a way. And so I balance that out with the Lakers and the Dodgers where I can cut more creative stuff. We do docu-series type reality shows with all these teams, and so we're essentially cutting like a reality show on these teams. And so there you can get creative.
You follow
because you have producers in the field that are trying to find stories for you, and then you come back and try to creatively, you know, tell stories off the court, off the field. And so,
and how much time do you get to do this?
For Lakers was a quick turnaround, because as we were talking earlier, stuff becomes dated within a couple days. If you don't air something, it just becomes out of sight, out of mind. And so there were some times where I was turning around what we would call game segments, which would be maybe it's game 5 of the NBA finals and they want a full-on music with calls and with, you know, audio, kind of a souped up sort of highlight package, right? And I'll have to turn that around in probably less than 24 hours, because I'll be watching the game. I'll get the footage uploaded for me, which was all weird this year because they were out in Orlando. Normally,
right,
they're in LA, they go back to the studio, but I had a guy out in Orlando uploading stuff for me overnight, basically. And then by the next day, I'd have to have that cut ready, because we go through audio mix, we go through color, we go through a whole finishing process.
Are you working?
And that will air in about a day later. So essentially, I'm cutting a game that just played that will air as a stylized segment in like 2 days, basically.
Okay.
Because
but you're doing this.
If we don't air it that week, then next week it's already dated. Yeah.
And then, but you're doing all this from your home. No,
I have been since this year. I have been. Usually I would go in, I would get 2 days just to go into the studio. But starting since July, it's been all from home. I haven't gone into the studio at all. So
do they supply you the equipment to be able to do this?
I have my own editing stuff that I've used on other freelance projects that I worked on earlier this year. So there's a little bit of, I'm using my own equipment on this, but NFL, what they gave us is these little boxes, and this is all they give you. It's almost like a router, but essentially I'm just networking to a cloud edit machine. And so NFL everything is done remotely now. And they've just given all the editors these little routers that basically allow me access to everything I would have normally. So it's all changed, man. It's really this I think the future, and we were talking about this earlier, I don't see why any of these places would want, if they could trust their people to work remotely, I could see the NFL continuing this moving forward probably.
But you guys just got a new stadium in LA.
That's what's so crazy. They just have a whole new network that's actually, I've seen pictures that's already built,
Yeah.
but they're not going to bring in most of
No.
technically they're not going to bring in like a lot of people like me. They'll bring in like stage people, they'll bring in, studio, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
but I visited Greg on Jefferson in Culver City, which is where the NFL Network is currently. They got like 100 editors working there round the clock, shoved into these tiny little cubicles, these tiny, everybody just all over the place. Yeah. It's just so chaotic. But the server, which is everything that the NFL films, the legacy, all the football highlights, everything, that's all in the server, which is back east, I assume. Some of it is in Culver City. And
no, it's back east.
That little boxes, you have access to everything they ever done. That's amazing.
We have some cloud basically drives that we don't have a ton of storage, but it's enough to survive about a week's worth before they'll purge out kind of feeds and stuff. But I've done it for the last 2 weeks and it's been a lot. I think maybe because I started like week 5 or 6 and they were able to work out some of their technical issues, but it's been way more smooth than I ever thought it would be to be able to produce a live show.
What do you need on your end as far as the connections? Is it just plain internet or do you have
just
fiber?
Internet? I'm not even on a fiber. I'm on a pretty standard internet connection and it hasn't affected me getting. With live TV, I could literally be working on something on my screen and I could see it air on TV in like 2 minutes.
Whoa.
Yeah. So
they got this down.
They're starting to, and like I said, I think it'll be a balance of who they want to bring in, but it's just at this point, I think, unless things start to change, I think it's actually really kind of readjusted a lot of people's workflow ideas. So
the idea, okay, here we go, folks. All you students who are belabored with this whole Santa Monica College, everything is online, everything is Zoom conferences, Zoom classes. I spend more hours on this computer than I ever have. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about. I mean, it is all the emails that come out, all you instructors, you guys know what I'm talking about. It's almost double the work to deal with this. And what Greg is saying is this is the future for, people who are dealing with this technical side of things. Maybe not.
Well, let me jump in real quick. Well, Drew talked about earlier about communication and that being a big key. And that was a big key when I was going into the studio and having to physically see people. But now we're doing literally everything on Slack. I am just getting somebody texting me and giving me thumbs up and smiley faces when something's good or something's bad. So even that has become a point where NFL doesn't want people to be on physically, like on Zooms or like texting. It's all just on basically on a posted sort of thing. So it's all changed, and I'm still getting used to it.
So what I'm trying to get at is all you students who've been struggling to do this, going on Citrix and linking up and using who knows what, having bad internet connections, whatnot. This is the future, man. You guys are learning how to deal with this. This is a real skill set to learn to be able to interact the way we're doing right now. There's a chat thing going on. You guys are, during my classes, sometimes that chat thing just going zing, and there's all these like second and third level conversations among the students, and somewhat related to what I'm doing, sometimes not. And so, which I think is great. I mean, we are interactively communicating in this way. And what Greg is telling us, this is, they probably prefer you stay home and don't. And even though they built this whole facility at the new, stadium in Inglewood, which was what, NFLs were just waiting for. And now that's done, no one's using it. God, that's confounding.
They bring in one person now. So normally they would have 4 of us in on a show. They bring in one person now just to handle anything high traffic-y or stuff that's a little bit easier to handle on site.
Do you prefer this? Do you prefer this or not?
Oh yeah, I prefer not going in. That's always been the problem with some of these shows, is because on a live show, you're kind of at the mercy of what happens during the day. So it's not like from 9 to 5, I am cranking from 9 to 5. Normally I'm cranking from like 2 to 5, because they usually wait till after lunchtime a lot of times to make really hard decisions
Yeah.
on the live show. And so, not that I'm not productive in those hours, but it looks kind of bad when you're not assigned something for like 2 hours, which happens a lot of times at NFL, where
Mm.
I'll have my PA tell me that we're just waiting for some audio to come
Yeah.
out or something. And
Well,
that's where like you can try to be productive, but it's really hard there. But whereas if I'm doing that at home, then I can actually do something, work on something else, find something else in the meantime. So
okay. Hallie, you're always remote. I mean, not always, but currently everything is remote now, I assume. Is that true?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so those big rooms, those big writers' room, like 10 people all sitting around the table, throwing things back and forth. How do you guys deal with that now?
So we Zoom every day. So I just wrapped up on a writer's room where we were meeting from 9:30 to 1:30, which felt very civilized because normally rooms go quite late.
Yeah.
But I think with Zoom, like sort of to everybody's point, like you don't want to be sitting on the computer any longer than you need to be. So we would just all hop on a Zoom, and you do miss the intimacy of it. Like normally by the end of a room, I know everybody's spouse's name and what they do on the weekends and what their dog's dietary issues are. But now you get in there, you get in the Zoom, you talk politics for 3 minutes, and then we all get to work. So it's definitely more efficient, but it's wild.
Yeah.
I have to feed myself.
Oh, imagine that. Yeah.
I know. I have a lot of bagel bites right now.
Oh yeah. But yeah, craft services and whatnot, they need to keep you there so you don't run out on them. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. They give us snacks to try and make us sedentary.
Yeah.
Now I have to get my own snacks.
Oh, imagine that.
Yeah.
That was when there was a period of my time as an editor. I didn't explain who I am, but I'm a freelance editor, 40 years in LA, and pretty much like everybody else, just hopping around here and there, doing all this and that and whatnot. And I was fortunate to make a life out of that. And then now I teach. So those who don't do anymore end up teaching, I guess. Anyway, so, but yeah, I remember working in trailer companies where, oh man, what a grind that is. And it's just so conveniently that they bring food in every day for lunch and dinner, because usually you're going to have to do that. And in that sense, at lunch, amazing hot lunches, but there's nowhere to sit down to eat because there's no dining room. Oh, then I guess I'll just take my lunch back to my edit bay and I'll sit at my desk and I can eat while I'm looking at more footage. And so, if we all decide to go out to lunch, I mean, that's a whole hour by the time you go somewhere, get into the restaurant, sit down, get your order, by the time you walk back or whatever. I mean, you burn a whole hour easily in LA. But when they serve you these meals, I mean, you're 20 minutes, you're done. And then you keep working some more. And that was the trick. And that was the kind of understated payoff. That's how they would coerce you to stick around. And, we had a dessert chef come in the afternoon. So we get all our sugars so we could, go even further, I mean, it was intense. Yeah.
I want to be on that set. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. But those days are pretty much gone now. Those days are gone.
Sounds like some J.J. Abrams magic.
Yeah. I mean, they do. I mean, if you've ever been to the big facilities, was the big ad agency down in Marina Del Rey, who has the Apple account. I mean, that campus is just insane. And it was like basketball courts inside and huge, there's food everywhere all the time, coffee, soda, drinks, you name it. And they just didn't want anyone to leave, so you come in and you're just ensconced for what seems like days. But anyway, but Brian, I mean, this doesn't sound like your kind of thing, the things we were describing. all this digital tech stuff that you're hooked into, your specialties is pretty much staying analog. Is that true? Would I be wrong to suggest that?
Well, that's one of the 17 jobs. But there's ones where we're doing Zoom meetings all the time, and I'm working on book projects, which involves computer writing and editing all the time.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot of that, and we, again, everybody's pretty much forced into their corner. There's some small interactions I have. If like a client brings over some tapes, they'll drop them off for 10 or 15 minutes, and we work on them for a week. So it's minimal interaction, very safe in my opinion, and I wouldn't want to have it any other way. I believe in shutting this down before it keeps going on forever.
So okay, all right, good point. Where do you go from here, Brian? What ultimately is the next level, the next goal?
One of my things is to have people take on some of what I do, and in other words, be a boss and have them work for me. Mostly I do things myself because I have a unique skill set, and you can't just hire someone to do what you do. You can hire, maybe Picasso's brother can paint too, but it's not going to be the same thing as hiring that one person who has an experience level and a skill set and a viewpoint on things. So any of us, even among the students there, have a unique set of things. So I do hope that at some point, some of the business things I do can be farmed out to other people, so I don't have to work as much or as hard. And then, it's not that I want to not work. I love my jobs, but I want to not be stressed about it. I had a horrible week last week, and it was almost no sleep, and it was deadlines, and it's the way it goes. Sometimes it's feast or famine.
Yeah. Would you consider the idea of, as we're taking apprentices on, to pass on some of these skill sets? I mean, you're talking about a very rare situation here.
Yeah, I mean, in the previous cases, we did books ourselves. We would lay them out ourselves. We would license the photos. We still do that. But at this point, we're saying, why don't we just hire someone to do the layout at least, so we can focus on the creative part? Layout is creative, but it's more time consuming than it is making creative decisions. And then in my studio, a lot of the work I have, again, transferring tapes, as I mentioned earlier, is not that creative. So I have a coworker who I hired to work there. And my goal is to eventually not go in, and he'll be good enough with maybe some other assistants to take all of the non-creative work away from me and keep it rolling. And I can just take the creative fun stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Greg, I mean, where's your career headed? Where do you think? Are you happy to be just because it's seasonal work? You're doing seasonal work. Football's not year round. Baseball's
it's weird though, because the NBA is planning to come back by Christmas, and so essentially, I mean, I'm already doubling up as it is between both. It's just now that the Lakers and the Dodgers seasons are over, we're probably in about a month kind of freeze period, but the timing almost just worked out too perfectly, because I told NFL I wasn't going to be available until both of the other two seasons were finished up. And then literally I started NFL last week. And then the other job, basically, I probably won't go back to, for another few weeks, basically. But it becomes something where I look at it, where I use it as a seasonal thing, because once the season ends, then I open myself up to a bunch of other projects. It's like kind of frees myself up to continue like editing stuff, or that's kind of my time to kind of recalibrate in a way before I take on whatever the next big thing might be. And so that's kind of, I've always looked at it, but now with the NFL being remote, I won't be so adverse to not want to work in the off season. I've usually tried to just make it a seasonal thing, because once football season's over, I don't want to. There's not a real big demand, and also like want to from me to want to keep putting in that work, obviously. But we'll see. There are a few things probably lined up that could just be things that come out of nowhere. It could be projects that we start now that we can pick up steam when NFL dies down. But
Are you talking about non-sports things or are you talking about other sports things? I mean, I thought you were doing soccer at one time too.
I was, but I have another partner down here in LA that I do a lot of my, I guess you could say, a lot of my other projects. We collaborate on, he was the director on Insanity, but I mean, we collaborate on a lot of other things. So currently, right now, he's out shooting. I guess they're shooting, they want it to be like a Netflix kind of show, one of these sort of chef shows, but he's out on a reserve and they're hunting like big game, like animals. And the chef is a renowned chef, kind of trying to just capitalize on this whole sort of boom of chef shows and stuff. But it's the kind of thing where there could be a time where they need me to work on that, and I could work on that as a side project while still kind of dabbling in the sports realm, because the sports realm is great, but I like the balance of trying to take on other challenges
Okay.
that
Okay.
don't require me having to think in that sort of mode, I guess.
Right. Right. It's a nice, well, I mean, a couple years ago,
Creatively too, yeah.
in the last several years, you worked on a documentary about Chinatown, and
I did a feature-length PBS documentary on Chinatown in the 1960s and 70s and the activism and all and what was going on. That was, and see, something like that's a perfect example, Walt, where like you take on a project and you end up learning a lot about yourself as you take on these things. And I don't, it's not like sports, I can't get the same sort of kind of feeling from doing something, but it is sort of like at the end of the day, sports is, at least to me, it's entertainment, but it's not like I'm saving lives or anything, or I'm actually, you know, I'm providing an entertainment, but to be able to like work on a project where I'm actually getting to learn about stuff and learn a material that's actually really close to my upbringing was
Right.
super rewarding for me.
no, it was definitely a passion project. I don't think you made much
Totally.
money on that.
And sometimes I think that's what the balance is of working freelance and working on all these just normal jobs. Sometimes you take a job that isn't going to pay you upfront or isn't going to pay you what you think you're worth, because it's going to balance out what you're trying to accomplish in terms of either your goals within your own profession, I think. And like,
Right.
one, I know Walt's seen the documentary, but
Yeah.
it's that was a challenge for me to work on a time period that I didn't have a lot of obviously background on, and try to bring all that passion and all that, like you're saying, that passion from those people, and to bring it onto the screen was something where I felt like I needed that challenge at that time. So
Right, right. It was a documentary based on the period where I was very
my
much.
parents grew up
Yeah.
in that time period, so
Yeah.
that's why it felt like I was
Yeah, he's saying I'm an old guy, really. Yeah, yeah. I'm an old guy. And I
it felt
am.
like it felt like I was revisiting exactly what my parents had gone through,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, yeah,
my
yeah.
parents had grown up in that same time period. And
Yeah.
so I was learning. I mean, my mom was bringing up pictures of her as a little girl in those same neighborhoods in Chinatown, because she grew up there. And so
Yeah.
so the reward is definitely not always in the monetary. There's a reward in the journey, I think, and the people that you end up being able to collaborate and work on these things with. So
No, it was a very good project. I still think it's and I was fortunate. The producer gave me looks at rough cuts that you did, and then I was able to give notes on it just to add to the mix of opinions and whatnot. And I appreciate that. And I thought you actually, given the where it was when the early cuts I saw and the conversations about why you guys were doing this, how it was going to be done, I thought the end product was definitely solid. I mean, totally solid, you know, and that was good, because again, it's a weird part of history, the 60s into the 70s in Chinatown. You had a lot of the gang kind of situations, the political things of China, the war, my parents, the whole thing was all there. So tough subject matter. But anyway, But Hallie, I mean,
completely opposite than sports, right? Something completely on a
absolutely.
different, which so that like I said, it makes me have to think in a different way, think of a different audience that I'm trying to present this to. And so those are all things that just make me better at what I'm trying to be at. So
oh, good, good. I appreciate that. Hallie, I mean, do you find yourself getting involved in projects where you know necessarily that this may not go and that it's a passion project, is a chance? I mean, does that ever happen or does
Oh,
it?
I mean, I think almost everything you work on, you accept a level of insecurity that it's going to get made. Like I was working on a TV show for the last 20 weeks and we just found out we're not going to get greenlit. So you sort of go,
Whoa.
okay, well, at least I got paid for it and I met some nice people and I made some good connections, and you try and like I learned something. I think one of the nice things about being a writer is you tend to work with other writers, so you're usually learning something about other people's processes and how they view story and what they prioritize. And so you try and sort of see the net win, I think.
Mhm.
Like I think if you're goal oriented in freelance life, you're probably going to be disappointed. I think you've got to like process.
And what do you mean by that? I mean that it's what, that you'd be disappointed, or that what, that it's a
Well, like because
that
so much
fail.
stuff takes, yeah, because a lot of things don't stick or are up in the air, or don't get the reviews you wanted, or don't go the way you wanted, or fall. Yeah, like there's so many variables in this kind of business that if you don't, like, speaking for myself, if you don't like writing, then the wins come so far in between that it's just not worth it. Like,
Um,
I worked on this game for 4 years. If I didn't like the process of working with the game developers, the week that it came out is not going to make that time up for me. So,
right.
I think you've really got to enjoy
But
working
sometimes you
with
don't
the
know
process.
that. You can't be guaranteed that going into it, do you?
Yeah, no. And that's why I
There's
think
no
you have to enjoy
guarantee.
process. No, absolutely not.
Have you ever found yourself, you said, okay, this is a train wreck. I need
Yeah.
to walk away from this. I'm
Oh,
I
I've
mean,
entertained walking away from a few jobs, but I'm very stubborn and I'm like, no, I'm just gonna write it out. I can take it. I can
to
take
the
it.
bitter end.
Well, and what's fortunate is that a lot of freelance work, you're like, I only have to do 10 weeks or I only have to do 20 weeks. It's when the contracts like move past that deadline
Yeah.
and then they just kind of indefinitely extend where you're like, I don't know if I can make this anymore. I think I might cry. But for the most part,
But isn't that how
again,
all studio work is? Pretty much.
what?
That they
Just
just
on
keep
like 10 to
extending it.
20.
They keep, yeah.
Oh, sometimes I've worked on several shows that like the Nick Refn show, my contract was for 10 weeks and I ended up working 13 months or 16 months on it or something insane. Yeah. And then Westworld, my contract was 6 months and I ended up working 13 months on that, I think. So
But that wasn't a
they
bad
can go
deal.
long.
That
Huh?
wasn't bad. That wasn't a bad thing, was it?
No. But again, like with this freelance life, like, it's also in flux. You think
Yeah.
you're going to get in you getting into one situation and you're always going to be surprised. So I think if you don't like the day-to-day of it or big portions of it, then it's probably a bad fit.
But then, okay. How do you survive okay, do you see that as unstable?
Wine is whatever the question is. The answer is wine is how I solve it.
Red or white or both?
Red.
Yeah.
With ice cubes to offend my family.
but it's a tough life. And I think, Brian, you will jump in to say that, yeah, this is a choice one makes. You go into it willingly. You go into it with bravado. You like that challenge. If it was all guaranteed, steady as can be, would you get, 4 years, that's a long, steady run, but at some point you need to say, I got to walk away from this too, right? Would you want to do gaming forever, as it were, and nothing else? Would that satisfy you?
That was offered to me. I was offered to stay and do it full time, and I miss the freelance life. Like I do, for me, I miss that life. I miss the experiencing new stories and getting to sort of crack open new things. But
get
no,
you.
I loved working in games. I mean, I love, I'm sure I'll work in games for the rest of my days because it's such a weird niche knowledge to have.
Yeah. But isn't there something true about how can they miss you unless you go away?
No, that's exactly
Something
why I
like
did
is
it. I
that
was
the
like,
Loretta
no,
Lynn
no, no,
song?
you guys are getting too
I'm
complacent.
grossing. I'm destroying that lyric. Brian, help me on this. Right? Is that
That's it.
you're right?
That's the words.
I just hear Sting, in my head saying free, set them free.
And
But yeah, no, that's exactly why I did it. I just wanted them to long for me more.
well, but then the other thing also, and you guys, either of you guys can chime in on this one, is the luxuries to be able to say no. It took me a long time to get to the point where money, opportunity, maybe a certain status title, and I said, no, I know better than to take that because that would be that'll just suck me dry. And I got too much life to live to let that totally control me the way they need to. You sell your soul to the studio. And the hardest thing and the best thing is to say just no, ain't gonna happen. I'll freelance for you, but I am not gonna go staff for the next 2 years to work on this one film, whatever, is that
And then they always want you more. They
Mm.
always want you more when you say no.
Yeah.
Or if you're like, I'm a little too busy, but I can do this.
Nah,
Like you think it's gonna go poorly, but it often goes well. Okay, not always, but often.
Yeah. Brian?
I think you mentioned a key point in life is when you're willing to walk away from, any negotiation or a relationship or a city you live in or something, then you have a kind of freedom that other people don't have. And I was in a job years ago just working in a music instrument store, and I thought I'd rather be working in music studios making records, but there's never enough business to do it. But you can't really commit to that if you're doing something else. In other words, you can't be free to make a record for 2 weeks if you have a job you need to go to. So you get caught in a sort of trap. And to me, it was almost like jumping off a cliff by quitting the job that I knew was easy money, easy for me to do, not a lot of trouble, but it wasn't what I really wanted to do.
Right.
And after I talked to quite a few people, one even said to me, he said he saw lives change the most when people had, and I wouldn't call it faith. It might be even stupid to do it, but to leap off a cliff, hoping to find a branch on the way down, because you're just not really happy being on the cliff edge. It's on the edge of something exciting and something good that you might want to try. I can see where if I said I want to be a great film director or a great actor, I can't just commit to doing that and expect to pay the rent and so forth. It doesn't always work that way. But there are times in life when you can risk something and even lose, even fail, and not be afraid of that. And so I think that we're talking about career choices, we're talking about life choices. And I oftentimes, if you think about it as an optimist, saying, I don't even know what's around the corner. It's possibly different or better than I'm imagining, or at least as good, or maybe leads to a new life that I didn't plan for. You're actually taking your hands off the reins, off the steering wheel, and saying, what will happen? And oftentimes that's a really good position to be in, to not be trying to control everything in your life is actually kind of bold.
Right. I totally agree with that. I always have this thing in my head, and goes back to that poem, the road less traveled, the path less taken, all that idea, is that if I had a choice of saying continuing on to do something I know that I've comfortable, kind of safe path, and then there'll be this opportunity to try something completely different, go into an arena that I've not been in before. And if those two things present themselves in some way, it's never always that clean, and it's not always that specifically that, okay, you can start Tuesday or you're going to start Wednesday. No, it's never that clear cut, but you got to negotiate for each one, even though, and I would always take the path less traveled, because how is he going to grow? How is he going to learn new things? How are you going to meet new people, which is, again, what Brian, you were saying earlier, it's a collaborative thing. You have to deal with people. And sometimes it's easy to just get ourselves in these little spaces and kind of block out the reality of it, that's just so much effort to hustle something or to hustle someone or follow up on a phone call to get the next level stuff, but you got to suck it up and do it. And that's the hard thing. Because if I always stayed with the tried and true, I'll always just be stuck in that one strata. And in this town, it's about the freelance life is the crazy life. And it's so much more exciting ultimately. And I think, and I don't know if the students here will have that choice to not do that, because I think everything is going to start fragmenting a little bit more, perhaps. And so the key here, if we all can start thinking about what advice, okay, that's my next question for my three panelists. What advice would you give to prepare yourself for this life and this road that we're talking about here, that we're all saying is so wonderful for us? And I will always disclaim that, says, okay, this is what I did, and I may not suggest that, say, for my daughters to follow my trail. And in fact, that is very true. They're not going to follow my path, but it served me well, and I still enjoy, and I have no regrets. You know, I mean, Greg, I mean, what would you think is the most important to do what you've ended up doing? What was so important in your, now looking back, the note to your younger self? What do you think was the key thing that helped you get through all this? What skill sets did you need to have?
What Brian said earlier is key, is actually a big thing, because I think inherently as an editor, you can feel like you're pushing buttons, but especially for some place like an NFL, where I'm working with people. I mean, I see it just firsthand, where you can have somebody just sitting in front of the computer and editing without any sort of ability to kind of communicate and figure out what's going on. And I think that's probably why at NFL, like, I've been able to keep working there as long, is because I don't look at it as I'm going in just giving me my assignments and I'll give it to you. It's, let's figure out the best way to do things. Let's learn about, because you're going to be working with these people consistently, probably throughout the week or throughout however long you're on. And so, and on projects in general, I think, like, I always look at it from that collaborative point of view, where it's always kind of a sum of all the parts of the people that are involved, and you embrace your role. That the Chinatown doc is a good example, where the people that were working on that project had spent almost a year trying to figure out ways to tell the story. So by the time I got brought on, I think my role was kind of clear, in a way that there had been some stuff already kind of laid out for me, and it was time for me to be able to bring my skills to get it to where we got it to.
Yeah.
But I always feel like, looking back, it's always the people, I feel, because I'm still working and collaborating with people that I started out with almost 20 years ago. And so meeting people along the way, and the networking, and kind of knowing that at any point in this industry, you'll get people that maybe you haven't connected with in a while, but within this network,
Oh yeah.
And all the things that go into writing, music, editing, shooting, I mean, all these elements that come together, you're going to always kind of have these sort of resources. And it all goes back to how you were able to communicate with these people, and how you were able to work with these people, as a team.
Yeah.
So
Great. Yeah, no, this is a very good point. I'm going to have to jump to Hallie. She has to take care of some family issues. And so what would be your advice at this point as a writer who's done very well, if there are writers in this group, what will be the key things that is important to learn from that you've learned?
Yeah, that I have learned. I think a few things I would say is always live below your means, because freelance life is unpredictable and you want to save.
Oh,
That's
darn, I shouldn't have picked up that BMW. Yes. Darn it. Okay.
I would, because, you know, to somebody's point, it's like, it's always feast or famine, and the dry spells do come no matter how good you are or how lucky you've been. I would also say, like, and speaking from experience as somebody who's also like, just probably like all these guys, just worked with a ton of people. Attitude matters so much. Attitude usually matters more than talent, frankly. Like,
Wow.
if somebody's a really nice person and like really easy to work with and receptive to notes and likes to sort of get in there and keep a positive attitude, that person will get hired for the next season probably sooner than the person who had brilliant ideas but was a dick.
Yeah.
Like truly, I've seen people who are not that great but are just so lovely succeed because people like working with them. And at the end of the day, to the point about being able to say no to jobs, like, you want to have a pleasant work environment, and people will get to a point where they don't have to work with people they don't like.
Yeah.
And you know, so if
But
you can,
wait.
yeah,
But we're not talking about kiss ass people too now, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Don't be
oh,
so
I mean,
obvious.
yeah, oh yeah, I mean, look, I think
Be
everybody
genuine.
should be charming, but if your nose is really dug up in there, people,
Yeah, it's
I
too
mean,
obvious.
some people really like it. I'm sure there are some people that love it. Look, let's not judge. I'm sure there are some people who really need that for their
Yeah, they're
ego, and it's
called
very fragile.
showrunners. Yeah, right. But anyway.
Sure, exactly. Exactly.
Sorry.
You know, but for the most part, I think positive attitude, willingness to work, being prompt, like turning your stuff in on time, not being a diva, like that matters more than talent, I would say.
Mhm.
Talent will get you in the room, but beyond that,
Right. There you go.
it's good
What
attitude.
gets you the callback? What keeps you coming back? I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, with writing, it's weird because people have read my stuff usually before I get the meeting. Like, I get the meeting because they've read my stuff and they go, oh, we like her material. Let's see if we like her attitude. So for writers, it's kind of the reverse, I think, of a lot of people, where it's like, let's see what their work is. It's like, they know what my work is when I'm coming in. Now they're just picking like a sports team of attitudes.
Right.
And I usually, I'm very non-threatening. I'm 5'1" and like not even a buck. So like, you know, I come in and I'm like, oh, they're like, oh, we can put her in a corner like a house plant. You know what I mean? It's easy.
Yeah.
But I really think the best thing I would say is, like, without being too sycophantic, like just be chill.
Yeah.
And be ready to work. Like, they're also like, if you are hardworking, you're gonna stand out, because so few people, I feel like, are. And if you want to be a successful freelancer, you have to be. And so if you're willing to just really do the grind, you're going to be ahead of 90% of the people.
Right. Because good help is hard to find. Reliable people who deliver, who give who don't make false promises, meet deadlines, and just be smart about it. I mean, in a way, everything that you guys are saying is, I hate to say it, but it's common sense of just good humanity, good way to deal with people. And we sure need that today, you know. I mean, I think it goes and go for a long way. I think, you know, there aren't that, I mean, if anybody wants to shout out a question right now, I'll take it. But I think I'm going to start wrapping up here. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I feel very, very fortunate to have you guys be so generous in letting us know the stuff about yourselves, sharing this stuff. And here's for me, is that there's a point in time when I decided that I'd rather do something I prefer, which was visual and being creative, than the more mundane 9 to 5, clock in at 9, go home at 5, and I veg out and watch TV. And then weekends, I couldn't get my butt off the couch because I was so beat. And then dreading on Monday morning, and then hope that maybe I'll have vacation after 6 months. I mean, that was a horrible sentence to a life that did not make sense. And I'm not putting down the people who work really hard and be consistent. And there's something about longevity. My dad worked as a bartender for 28 years at the same place. And when he retired, he had a pension that he was set till he died. And I don't think I can do that. I know I can't do it because I haven't done that. And I won't be able to do that. And there's a different generation. And you guys, the next generation of people, you guys all here, is yet another, iteration of this. And that we're all freelancers, Brian, Greg, Hallie, and myself. And it's, God, I would not trade that for anything. I have such a fun and entertaining career, so to speak. Okay.
Walt, I have a question from a student for Hallie.
Please.
If you can answer, student wants to know how many writers were there for the Last of Us Part 2, and can you tell them about any current or future projects that you will be working on?
Yeah, I can answer most of that.
Okay.
So for The Last of Us Part 2, the writers were Neil Druckmann, who was the director of the game and the creator of the first game, and I co-wrote the story. And then we had 2 other writers who helped us do supplemental writing and additional writing, Josh Scher and Ryan James, blacked out on a name, who are both wonderful and great. And those guys are permanent Naughty Dog writers, so they're always there helping out on all the projects. So there were 4 of us in total. Though I will say that I definitely stole the brains of half of the studio for brainstorming sessions and, working out little story ideas throughout the way. And then in terms of new projects, I can't speak about anything that's going on at Naughty Dog because everything is always very locked up there. But for me, I can say I just finished a rewrite on a Jessica Alba action movie that'll probably get shooting soon, and I am just signed to adapt a comic called Fatale, written by Ed Brubaker. So I am going to write about scary Lovecraftian noir ladies. And then I've got a few other jobs that are less, that are more workhorse-y. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing right now that I can talk about.
Another student just wrote in. How do you know a narrative works?
Whew. Wow, that's a very smart and very challenging question to answer. At this point,
maybe it'll help if the second part may go with that. What kind of thinking goes into making a story the magnitude like The Last of Us Part 2 or Westworld? Does that help?
No, but
Okay.
I appreciate the question. How do I know a narrative works? At this point, I said I trust my gut and my education. Like, I'd say a lot of creative mediums, and the other guys can probably speak to this, like, you think it's like all talent and creative and great ideas, but it's like 80% of it is skill, is just like being a plumber and learning how to be a plumber. So at this point in my job, I think what I've learned is really how to fix problems and feel when something doesn't land. I know it works if it's starting to resonate, if it feels like a story that's important for me to tell, if it feels like these are characters that I think are important to be out there in the world and are saying something, then it usually will work. And then obviously I have a group of writer friends and director friends who I then will send things off to and be like, I don't know, does it work for you? Because I've just been living in a bubble in my sweats for 3 weeks. I don't actually know. You guys have to tell me, gut check me. And I think using your community to gut check you is really good. I would also say, and I always give this spiel, but like, I love writing books. If you want to be a writer and you don't want to go to school for it, you don't have to. There are wonderful books out there. I would recommend all the Blake Snyder Save the Cat books. Matt Bird's The Secret of Story is wonderful and no one talks about. K.M. Weiland wrote a book called Creating Character Arcs. I just started reading Into the Woods by somebody named, I think, Thomas York, I think is the name of the writer, which is nice. I read compulsively. I would also say, watch as much as you can, read as much as you can. Like narrative narrative is intrinsic to sort of all entertainment. And so if you can figure out why something works for you, like, if you're watching The Queen's Gambit, which I highly recommend everyone watch, it's wonderful. But if you're watching The Queen's Gambit and you're suddenly like, wow, I'm really invested on whether or not this girl is going to win this stupid fucking chess match, ask yourself why. Like, what did they do? What worked?
Mhm.
And then, make those running lists in your head of when you watch I also love watching really bad stuff. Like, watch something really bad and go, why didn't this work? And how would you improve on it? Like, you're going to constantly be challenging yourself. And I think you just start to I don't know, like being a chef or something, you start to just sort of being able to feel it and know when something's going to work and when it isn't. But I know that's not like super helpful to be like, trust your gut, but I also say just read everything.
Right. There's a couple more rolling in for you. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm ready. It's okay.
Deadlines dictate where a story remains in development.
Great question. It depends on the medium. So for games, yes, to a degree. For games, we had an outline. We knew exactly what the story was going to be. And as I think is probably a universal truth, but I can only really speak to Naughty Dog, it balloons and balloons and balloons. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And suddenly you've got yourself a 30-hour game that wants to be a 40-hour game. And at a certain point, you just have to go, we don't have room for it. We don't have space for it. We don't have the bandwidth and the people to make it work. Let's tighten up what we have, which is usually always a good move anyway. Like, honestly, if you can cut something, you should cut it. And that's always a good writer rule. So condense, condense, condense. It's like boiling down a stock, So for games, yes, there came a point where you just sort of go, well, we have to ship by this date. So let's work with what we have and do the best we can with what we have. With film and television, it really depends on how long it takes you to write something. So like, for example, on this Jessica Alba thing, I had 6 to 8 weeks to do this rewrite on this movie. And, at a certain point, yes, you've just got to turn it in. But that's probably more just like work management. And then, of course, there are the things where something gets changed on the set or something, you have a problem on set and some pages need to get turned over immediately. And like, I would have that a lot on certain shows where somebody did something different on set or somebody's sick or something has to get reworked and suddenly you're cranking something out late and just trying to hit a deadline to make it work because, everybody's going to show up at 4 a.m. and you have to have something. So there are all those permutations, but I think usually you have enough room to do your job right, unless there's an emergency.
Okay, here's the next one. How do you split your time between readings? Oh wait, that wasn't it, sorry. Wow, there's more rolling in, sorry.
Oh, hi guys, this is nice.
Okay, Vicky, let's limit it.
Sorry, one more, this one's actually interesting. Not that the other one wasn't. What can writers who find themselves with some extra time right now do to help prepare themselves for a career? And are there specific projects that they can take on that would help them market themselves?
So I think this goes back to sort of what Walt was saying, but like, I think we're all coming up at a time where freelance life is really different than it used to be. And also people are creating content in a way that they never have before. So if you have a great idea for a story, make a podcast. Make a YouTube video. People are getting hired off of things that go viral all the time. Even if it's just moderately successful, then you have this credit and people can go and, when you apply for stuff, they can go and look at it right there and they can see the quality of your work right there. I'd say always be writing. Like I write 6 days a week compulsively. But also, it's sort of like a sport, but also just try and make as much content that you feel is good and polished. Don't just like throw out, I wrote something random. Like put out stuff that you care about and you believe in as much as you can churn it out because the volume matters and your internet identity matters. Even if you're just great at tweets, man, like I'm a shitty tweeter, but like, if you're great at it, you can crush, it's really, the resources are there. To Greg's point, like, you can get the materials on your computer. You can get the technology. You can watch YouTube videos on how to do stuff now. Like, it's really within your reach.
Okay. Vicky, let's
Right, here.
let Hallie go.
Yeah.
She's got to take care of some stuff. I'm going to keep, thank you so much.
Thank you,
I
guys.
mean,
I'm so sorry. I'm bailing early. I really appreciate
no,
all
no,
the
no, no, no.
questions
It's okay,
and
it's okay.
Thanks, Hallie.
yeah. Thank you
Appreciate
guys
it.
so much. Good luck. Have fun. And Walt, if you
Yeah.
need me, shoot me an email.
I will. I'll follow up. Thank you so much.
Bye,
Okay,
guys.
let's say bye to Hallie. Now, okay, Vicky, questions for some of the other people? Do you have some while we're still on?
Okay, you guys go ahead and post, or you can unmute at this point.
Yeah.
I think that they
David.
were rolling in for Hallie because they
David, you had something to throw in here? David? No? Oh,
No, I was looking for my response button, but I hit the record button by accident.
Okay, okay. But so I used David, who's one of our sound instructors at San Monica College,
And game.
does game sound, game development, a lot of interesting stuff. Give me some reaction to, because Brian was in because of you, and I really appreciate that, David. To when I needed someone saying, okay, I need a diversity, and you came up with Brian. Why? How'd that come about? How do you?
Well, I'm a big fan of Brian's. He doesn't really know this, but I was like a very early fan of the Moog Cookbook when it came out because I love that stuff. I love kind of loungy music. I love synthesizers. I love everything about, that kind of experimental recording process. And his work in music technology was also something that, kind of preceded our meeting. But getting together with him with his digitizing services has been just wonderful. We've worked on, I think, maybe 3 projects that I've been, working on back catalog stuff and remixing projects and label re-releases. And, I just find him like such a valuable guy in the biz. And it's because I think for a lot of what you guys have been saying, it's like because he's basically found this niche that, he makes him the go-to. And for him to follow his path to get to where it is, I mean, I feel the same parallel with what I've done. I mean, working in independent records and then working in the game industry and then working as a music technologist, you just keep following your nose from one opportunity to the next. And of course, as you know, I've been teaching at the college for almost 20 years now. So, that's.
Well, I just wanted everyone to understand that David, he released his own vinyl of your songs and your recordings, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's vinyl that was partially pre-released in the 80s. And I had to do a little flim-flammy publishing deal with my ex-labels to get it released. So I could basically do it on my own label.
Oh, great. So you wrestled it away for yourself.
Yeah, I kind of did a trade. I did one side of the album was stuff that was released on that label, and the other side was stuff that was unreleased. So I compiled it together, and in exchange for getting the rights to do the vinyl release, I gave the digital rights for the unreleased stuff to the label. And so it was a wash.
There is a question that came on an earlier link. And the question is there an inexpensive way to copyright your original music work, Brian? I'm not quite sure.
Well, it's not that expensive to copyright music, but what you can do, which some people have done, is create a set of things that go together. Let's say, for example, you've written a song, you want to register, you can register just the lyrics, you can register just the music, or the combined piece, which is a full song. But some people, if you really want to save money, take 8 or 10 pieces and call it an album and register the album instead as a piece of art.
Okay.
And so the way you might write a book, which is full of short stories, you don't have to copyright each short story. You can copyright the book. And so that gives you at least protection. But one of the things to know about copyright is not proof of anything. It's just a registration that I created something of my own, whether it be a storyline or a piece of music or something. But somebody you don't know might have done the same thing a week before in Australia, and maybe they've copyrighted it there. It doesn't mean that either of you completely own it and can stop anybody. But if it ever comes down to an argument or a legality, you can say, here's my registered date of when I did it. What's your registered date of having the same idea? Especially when you come up with things like script plots or stories like that. Musical ideas are very hard to be completely original. But you can do it with writing and lyrics and poetry and so forth. But keep in mind that registration is not something you have to do. You could also film yourself and put it on YouTube, and that would register in a way, a legal point saying, I put this video up on March 8th, 2018. When is your creation? When is your registration of it? And it just helps you get to the legal argument if you ever have to do that.
Okay, protect your.
Ryan, I've got a few questions here for you. For someone starting out as a sound designer, composer / songwriter, how can you protect your work? At what stage do you need to hire a lawyer or have work copyrighted? It's similar, I think, to what you just said. Is there an oh, this was the same question. Sorry, Walt. Then another question to you, Brian, is can you elaborate on finding your unique niche? Also, how to market an indie record?
Real quickly, because we're talking about protecting your work. We all hope that our work is good enough to steal. We all hope that our work is great enough that other people will be even interested in pretending to own it or to do it. So I would even, there are people who have absolutely ripped me off and been on the Grammy Awards and doing things like that. No, but I mean, it's like David mentioned the Moog Cookbook, which was a duo my friend Roger and I created. This ties into the second question you asked about finding your niche. This guy, Roger, and I had grown up when we were younger. Synthesizers in keyboard instruments were rare and expensive. And by that time, they'd become common. You could always buy them. So we went after the old ones that no one wanted that were quote unquote obsolete. And so I bought, a room full of keyboards for like $1,000 total at pawn shops and swap meets and Craigslist. And then I found this other guy who liked the old instruments that were obsolete. I mean, can you imagine buying an old television set? Can you imagine buying an old microwave or why people would want to do that? It was that dumb. But in a way, almost every one of those instruments is worth thousands now on its own. And because I bought them because I like them, but the new ones do so much more. The new ones are so much more powerful. Yeah, but I like the way the old ones looked and the way they worked. And they have a certain sound to them and a certain aesthetic. So there are some people that like old clothing and they don't want it made in a Chinese factory by the 10,000s. They want something that was hand beaded, maybe in the 1930s. Vintage clothing is a market. It's a small market, but it's active. So my friend Roger and I created a group because nobody cared. Nobody wanted us to do it for them. We had a duo where we played old style music with old style instruments, and it actually became really popular. I mean, we recorded it here in the bedroom in my apartment, and then a few months later, we're playing to 80 million people on MTV, and we didn't spend any money on it. But because we did what we wanted, and it was ahead of a wave of old musical instruments coming back, but we didn't do it to plan that. We did it because we liked it. So maybe you want to go back and edit videos with an Avid system and buy an old obsolete rig for $50 that used to cost $500,000 and try to hook up old floppy disk drives to it. That is so weird and backwards, but there are people doing that now with vintage graphics machines, vintage cameras. They're buying and shooting music videos with the old cameras they used to use on MTV because they have a look. And those directors, those cinematographers are able to create something that other people aren't doing, and they get hired for it. So part of what you need to do is find your style. And it might just be that you wear green clothes every day. And maybe you're a chef or a plumber and that only wears green, but people will remember you. And maybe you wear a plastic helmet, when you go to do acting jobs and you take it off before you get on stage. But if you're always that person that stands out for some weird reason, at least they'll remember you. And that's another reason to go for a niche rather than what other people are doing.
Okay, good one. So, great. Let me ask you a question, which was directed to me earlier. It says, what would you say is the best way for editors that are just getting started and don't have an extensive reel to go about getting an edit job? What would be your advice on that?
Getting an edit job, that it's a wide range, I guess. I
Or
think,
okay, let's just say getting a job to get started.
yeah, I think, well, look, depending on the job itself, it's probably going to be pretty specific to a type of what it is, whether it's docu or whatever it's asking for would be something where that's how I would prepare a reel, essentially, to reflect whatever the job that you're trying to apply for, whether that's finding stock footage somewhere that you can find on the internet to mess around with, or whether it's finding, depending on what they're asking for. I would think that you should cater specifically, because kind of going broad's a little bit, it's a little tough if you're saying just broadly produce like a reel, because that could be for 20 different types of editing jobs, I think. Like sports, for instance, if you wanted an example, if you wanted to get into sports, you could just find stuff that maybe you could string together like a highlight sort of thing, or mess around with footage. Whereas where if it's a reality show or something, then then you're taking stuff that's being out in the field and seeing what you can come up with. But reels are, well, you might, I don't know, as an editor, reels are, it's a tough one when it comes to reels, I feel.
Yeah.
Reels are tough when people ask for it, because it's like cutting something that's already been cut down again. And so how do you really show someone the full breadth of something if you're chopping snippets up of things for someone to view? I really think, like, depending on each specific individual.
But at the same time, Greg, you do have to show something.
Exactly. You have to have proof of something. And with experience, like on producing reels, like they're all kind of looking at sort of the standard sort of thing where you're stringing together clips with some sort of music, but you're also either trying to tell the story of stuff you've done, or you're taking pre-cut stuff of stuff that either has dialogue or has audio and inserting it and kind of creating moments from that. But starting from scratch, like, it just depends on if you have worked on any, worked with any other people on something, where maybe a friend shot something and they asked you, I need your help, putting together something, and you go off of there. Then you start kind of building, whether you start building your musical choices, you start kind of figuring out how you're telling a story. But it's difficult just to say start from scratch and produce something. It takes time to kind of come up with enough things, I feel.
Right. And I think it's really hard if you don't really know the business. And I think that's the challenge. I mean, I hate it.
I hate giving reels. I hate kind of even producing them, because it doesn't really, I feel, reflect what I could actually do.
Right.
So, but you're right. Each job will for it, and it's kind of it's definitely something where you can obviously find stuff online of other editors and how they've done stuff, but it's definitely something where you shouldn't go in, not kind of prepared on your own end, obviously. So.
And I think I would add to that ultimately, to actually get a job, you need to meet people, because people hire people. Computers don't hire people. Internet does not hire people. Demo reels do not themselves get you a job. It's people who get you a job. And so somehow you got, I mean, it's hard, even harder now, because we're not getting together anymore. But back in the day, I would go to these, club meetings where people of similar interests would gather, and then you just kind of chat up some people, or someone says something, you go ask them a question, and you start to learn how to communicate with other humans. And that is a tough thing to do right now. But that is it. Got to remember, people hire people, not computers, not reels, not purely on the email. You got to deal with humans. And that is a tough thing to overcome. And you could say, but I'm always shy. I don't think I do well. Well, Get over it, for crying out loud. You're going to have to get over that. You know, get used to talking and speaking for yourself. State your opinion, have an opinion, and be articulate or work on it. You know, it's hard. No one said it was supposed to be easy. No one promised you that life is going to be simple and easy and it's going to be wonderful. You make it what you want it to be, and it takes work. Vicky, how are we doing? That pretty much covers it for now? Because I want to start wrapping up.
Yeah, I think we can wrap up.
Okay, thank you. So let me just say again, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everybody else who's hung in here for this whole thing. I hope this is of value. I think it has been. I enjoy this a lot. And I tell you guys, it just, you know what it is? I think what it confirms for me, and I've been doing this a long time, you know, so-called career. I'd rather have a career than have a job. A job is where you got to do something and then you got to get paid for it. And therefore it's measured in those two things: work done, money paid. That's a job. A career, to me, and it's taken me a long time to figure this out, is to find something you really like and just do that, and find people who like the way you do it. And if for some reason you run into a situation where it's not pleasant and you're dredging every morning that you're going to have to go into this environment, that's a job, man. If you're going and doing something that just like what Brian, his 18 jobs a day kind of thing, I mean, God, that sounds crazy, but I can totally get it, man. I mean, it's so elusive, but yet fulfilling, perhaps. Brian, help me out. Is that true or not?
Yeah, it's not all at one time, that's for sure. Some get abandoned for months or even years at a time and maybe never turn into anything. But again, I'm not hanging my hat in one place. I would love to be a little more picky about it if I had my preference. But when good opportunities come up, they come up. Although my little whiteboard in my bedroom as I leave every day says no new projects. And then underlined it says no good deed goes unpunished. Because I've seen a lot of that recently. A lot of things seem like a simple, hey, do you want to help us, move out of our apartment? And it's a good friend of yours. But I've got these unfinished things that are much more important, that really, it's easy to say yes to this or that, but it's also difficult sometimes when it's supposed to take you 3 hours and it takes 10. It's supposed to take 1 day and it takes 50. So I have to be a little bit more pessimistic about things and just say that I've got these great things I want to do in life, and to focus on them, even though they're more distant fire. Sometimes the close fire is the only one that gets put out right now.
There you go.
More distant fire is actually more important to life, and I'm trying to focus on that. Even after we finish tonight, I'm going to jump back into book work for a few hours because I really want to work on one of these projects, and it's not been getting attention like it should.
Well, I really appreciate you hanging in with us the whole night. Great ideas. I like your whole outlook on life. It's a tough one, but you're proof that it can happen, and that's what I'm trying to say. That all of you guys, hopefully, you get a little bit something from each of these people. Greg, what's your closing thoughts? I mean,
it's a lot of what's been spoken tonight about what you had said about not approaching it as a 9 to 5. I'm going to clock in at 9 o'clock tomorrow for my job. I'm going to clock out for lunch. I'm going to clock out at 6, but it's not going to be something where, that's like that you were saying, that I'm dreading waking up tomorrow. I mean, obviously I'm waking up in my own house, but still, it's kind of the thing where, when we get into these things, I think to be doing it as long as it seems like a lot of us have been doing it, it's true. You're going to lose most of these battles, but I think almost not the unknown, but they'll always kind of hope that there could always be something project wise that comes up, or like things just always kind of come out of the blue. Like we were saying, like that insanity thing that was never supposed to happen. Stuff kind of just comes up and you kind of ride it. And I think as a career, you kind of just ride the roller coaster. And if you're cool with it being kind of like that, but at the end of the day, loving the feeling of it, then I think at the end of the day, you're not going to be too worried about, you know, all the stuff that goes with it. I think you'll be able to just enjoy what you do, and everything that comes with it becomes, you know, your life, I think. Um, so yeah, I mean, obviously enjoy what you do, and, you know, I think the passion part is something that we've echoed a bunch, but I mean, it helps. It helps. And this is, I think, an industry and a profession where that kind of has to show through.
Yeah.
Brian won't be doing what he's doing if he didn't feel that way about what he does. Same with you, won't. Same with me.
Yeah.
So I think that's what really keeps us not only wanting to get better, but really wanting to, you know, be able to do what we do in our craft, I think. So.
Yeah. So for me, I started this whole process tonight with saying, trying to find these three people who have completely divergent skill sets, doing completely different things, from music to writing to editing to sports to gaming to producing books and do their way. I think the connection's clear to me. Is about living your life. That's what these people are doing. They're living their life the way they can control it and the way they want it to proceed. It's ups and downs, but ultimately, you're not working for anybody. You're just being yourself. You are the boss. You are it. And it's your own call, you know? And I think that sense of control, that kind of sense, which in this business, this creative thing that we call our industry, our business, it allows for that. And that's the beauty of it. And that's what, if you, in this town, my God, we're the center of the universe, man, that we can do this. And everybody, I've gone to a bank to get a loan for a house. And I'm a freelance editor, and they understood what that means. And they didn't kick me out the door. They gave me a loan. And, you know, because in this town, it makes sense to some people. Okay. So take advantage of it. You guys are, everybody here, we're so privileged to be here in this time, in spite of everything else going on. I am just so keen, and I feel just so positive from this experience tonight. So I thank you all you guys who hung in here. And I think I'm going to wrap this up. Vicky, any last thoughts? How are you doing?
So this recording will get flipped, and it'll get posted on the Career Services Center YouTube page, which you can reach through the Career Services Center or Cool Careers portal. We're recording all of the cool careers that speakers were comfortable having us record. Actually, I can stop the recording.
And this is not just our department. This is the entire school. Every department had some kind of